Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging in, pun intended to,
Yeah.
a topic that's all about resilient gardening.
That's right.
We're looking at some really hard-won wisdom for creating a yard that's not just beautiful, but, functional. And we're doing it in one of the toughest places on Earth.
The Canadian Prairies. A short-season climate that does not suffer fools gladly, let's say.
Right. And you, our listener, shared some fantastic sources. It's this really comprehensive guide that goes way beyond the basics.
It really does. It's not just how to plant a petunia. It's everything from, the invisible life in the soil all the way to decoding the, let's say, creative language on nursery tags.
So our mission today is to pull out all those practical insights, the stuff that's going to help you avoid those really expensive and honestly kind of heartbreaking mistakes.
And get you to a place the author talks about where your garden becomes a friend, a sanctuary, and an excellent teacher.
I love that phrase. It just, it changes the whole dynamic, doesn't it? It's not a chore anymore. It's a relationship.
It is. And we have to start with the biggest philosophical point right up front because it governs everything else.
Okay.
To succeed in a place like this, you have to work with nature. You can't fight it. If you try to force something to live where it doesn't belong,
You're going to lose.
you are going to lose and you're going to spend a fortune doing it. And that gets to another key point. The difference between low maintenance and zero maintenance.
Yes. The dream of the zero-effort garden.
It doesn't exist. And that expectation, that you can just plant something and walk away forever, that's where the failure and the heartbreak really begin.
Okay, so let's get into the weeds, so to speak, the harsh realities.
Yeah.
When we say short season, what does that actually mean in, hard numbers?
The standard definition, the one you'll see in textbooks, is anything with fewer than 100 guaranteed frost-free days.
100. Okay, that seems doable.
It does. And a lot of the major prairie cities, Winnipeg, Calgary, they often get more than that, but often isn't always. It's not guaranteed.
And the sources had a pretty extreme example of that, right?
A very striking one. Bragg Creek, Alberta. It averages only 62 frost-free days a year.
62. Wow. That's barely 2 months.
Exactly. Think about that. A plant has just 2 months to wake up, grow roots, flower, set seed. It's a sprint. That is the fundamental constraint you're always working against.
It's amazing anything grows at all. But here's a twist that I found really interesting in the material. We think of prairie winter as this brutal enemy, but it's actually an advantage.
It's a huge advantage, and it's something gardeners in milder climates are genuinely envious of.
How so?
That deep, hard freeze, and especially the blanket of snow that comes with it, it's like a perfect insulation for the plant roots. It forces the garden into a proper rest and recharge period, a true dormancy.
Okay, so it's a forced nap.
A necessary one. Meanwhile, a gardener in, say, Vancouver is fighting against this constant mild, damp weather. Diseases can linger all winter, pests don't fully die off, roots get tricked into becoming active way too early in the spring.
And then they get zapped by a late frost.
Exactly. The prairie plant gets this guaranteed restorative sleep, and that's why the explosion of growth in the spring is so vigorous. It's been resting properly.
So if winter isn't the enemy we think it is, that brings up the first tool everyone learns about, the hardiness zone map. The sources suggest we should be pretty skeptical of it.
Very skeptical. Or at least we need to understand its limitations. I mean, the first question to ask is, what was this map even designed for?
I've never actually thought about that.
It was originally created just for trees and shrubs, large, woody, permanent plants. The goal was simply to assess if they could survive the absolute coldest temperature in a given winter.
That's it. Just cold survival.
That's it. It was never meant to be the definitive guide for perennials or vegetables or anything smaller. There are just too many other variables. But now we see a zone rating slapped on every single plant tag. It should only ever be your absolute first, most basic check.
But wait, this is the big aha moment for me. If the zone map is only measuring if a plant will freeze to death, what about the summer?
That is the exact limitation. That's the trap. So many plants fail on the prairies, not because the winters are too cold, but because the summers are all wrong.
Can you give an example?
The classic one is the Himalayan blue poppy, Meconopsis. It's this stunning, ethereal blue flower. It can handle the cold just fine, but it absolutely despises long, hot, dry prairie summers. It wants cool, moist, misty air. It it melts.
So it survives the winter and then dies of heat stroke.
Pretty much. And you see the reverse, too, those gorgeous scarlet and sugar maples from the east. They might get through a prairie winter, but they fail over time because they are desperate for the high humidity of an Ontario summer, which our dry continental climate just can't provide.
You have to look at the entire year, not just the lowest temperature.
The entire 12-month cycle, which leads right into this whole issue with plant tagging. It sounds like a systemic problem.
It seems like it causes a lot of confusion.
It's a huge frustration, especially if you're new to this. Think about it. The giant wholesale growers, the ones who supply all the big box stores, they're often located in a milder zone, like a zone 4.
Okay.
So they test their plants there, and then they put a generic hardy to zone 4 to 9 label on everything.
Right.
But if you live in, say, Winnipeg, which has zone 3 areas, or even colder, you see that zone 4 tag and you think, oh, I can't grow that. It's too fragile for me.
When in reality, it might be perfectly fine. They just never bothered to test it in a colder zone.
Exactly. Or the flip side is you buy something that truly isn't hardy because the grower just assumed and never tested the lower limits. You have to look past the tag and do your own research on where the plant actually comes from.
So once you've sorted out the big climate picture, the next step is to become a master of your own little climate, the microclimate.
Yes, your personal weather bubble. A microclimate is basically any protected spot in your yard that's sheltered from the worst of the elements.
So what did that look like in practice?
It can be anything. A big rock that soaks up heat all day and radiates it back at night. It also traps snow, which is great insulation. Or the classic one is the south-facing wall of your house or garage. That spot can be a full zone warmer than the rest of your yard.
And that's where you can start to push the boundaries a bit.
Yeah.
Grow something a little more tender.
That's exactly where the experts do it. But, and this is a huge but, the sources give a critical warning about the wrong kind of microclimate.
The man-made ones.
The ones we create by accident. There's this tragic, perfect example of a plant that was killed by winter injury, not because it was too cold, but because it was planted right in front of a heat vent from the house's furnace.
Oh, I can see how that would happen. You think you're giving it warmth.
You think you're helping, but what you're actually doing is creating this insane temperature fluctuation. The vent blasts it with warm air, it thaws out, then the vent turns off, and it snap freezes. Thaw, freeze, all winter long.
So it never gets to go into that deep protective dormancy we were talking about.
Never. You're basically torturing it to death. It's a classic mistake that comes from thinking about convenience instead of just observing what the environment is actually doing.
This all leads perfectly into the idea of marginally hardy plants. The ones that look so tempting at the garden center, but the guide says beginners should really steer clear.
Marginal hardiness is a tricky concept. It means the plant survives the winter. But that's about it. It never really thrives. It never reaches its full potential because it's in a constant state of struggle.
What's a good example of that?
The butterfly bush, Buddleia. In a mild climate, it's this big, glorious, arching shrub. In a place like Zone 3, the roots will live, but the entire top of the plant, all the woody stems, dies right back to the ground every single winter.
So you have to start over from scratch each spring.
Every spring, it'll flower on the new wood it produces, so it's not a complete failure, but you have to stop thinking of it as a permanent shrub. You have to treat it like a perennial that you cut to the ground. The popular black lace elder is another one. It looks amazing in the catalog, but here it will never, ever get to that impressive height.
And the key insight there is that because these plants are constantly stressed, just trying to stay alive,
they have no energy left for anything else. If a plant is putting all of its resources into just regrowing what died over the winter, it has no reserves left to fight off an aphid attack or a fungal disease.
So a truly resilient garden is built on plants that are actually happy to be there.
Exactly. Plants that thrive easily. Now, that said, if you are an experienced gardener and you have that perfect microclimate, you can have some fun. You can push the envelope.
Like with that ancient tree, the ginkgo.
The ginkgo biloba. It's a fascinating case. It's officially hardy to Zone 4, but there are these beautiful, mature specimens thriving in protected spots in places like Medicine Hat and Drumheller. Why? Because somebody planted them when they were young, gave them shelter from the worst of the wind, and let them adapt slowly over years. It just goes to show you how adaptable plants can be if the conditions are just right.
That brings us perfectly to the absolute foundation of everything, the soil. And I love the philosophy here. It's about moving past thinking of it as dirt.
It's a huge mental shift. The source describes it as a living, breathing work of art. Another great phrase was an empire beneath your shoes.
An empire. I like that.
Once you start thinking that way, you join what the guide calls the gardener's secret club. You realize your main job isn't to feed the plant, your job is to feed the soil, because healthy, living soil is the single best defense against everything: pests, disease. It manages water, it manages fertility, way better than we ever could.
So let's meet the citizens of this empire. Who's actually down there doing all the work?
Well, you've got the ones you can see, right? The earthworms, the centipedes, beetles, snails. But the real heavy lifting is done by the microbial world you can't see.
The invisible workforce.
Trillions of bacteria, microbes, and especially fungi. These organisms make up this incredibly complex food web. They are constantly breaking down organic matter, dead leaves, compost, anything, into a soluble form that plant roots can actually absorb. It's a perfect, self-sustaining nutrient recycling machine.
And the star player in that invisible world seems to be the mycorrhizal fungi. I find this relationship just mind-blowing.
It's one of the most amazing symbiotic relationships in nature. Mycorrhizal fungi create these vast networks of superfine threads, like a biological internet, that connect directly into the plant's roots.
So they're physically attached.
Physically attached, and these threads act like root extensions. They can reach much farther into the soil than the plant's own roots can, absorbing water and nutrients. They effectively double or even triple the plant's root system.
And what does the fungus get out of it?
In exchange for all that water and mineral delivery service, the plant feeds the fungi sugars that it creates through photosynthesis. It's a perfect partnership.
So they're absolutely essential. And the sources point out just how fragile this relationship is.
It's incredibly sensitive. Chemical fertilizers, fungicides, even just digging and tilling the soil too much can shatter those delicate networks.
Which is why we're now seeing inoculants for sale.
Right. Nurseries now sell packages of these beneficial fungi that you can add to the planting hole. It helps new trees and shrubs establish much faster. In fact, there's a company, Mike's, that's so confident in the power of their product that they'll actually extend the warranty on a plant if you buy it.
Wow. So they're literally putting their money where their mouth is about the value of soil life.
It shows that we're finally starting to recognize the economic value of microbial health.
Okay, so we want to encourage this natural system. But that brings us to a huge warning in the sources about trying to force the issue. Trying to be a chemist in your own backyard.
Yes, the strong warning against turning your garden into a chemistry lab. This is especially true for pH. A lot of prairie soil is naturally alkaline, and for decades the approach was to try and reclaim it by dumping on aggressive amendments like pyrite or gypsum.
And the dangerous.
It can be catastrophic. The reason is a concept called buffering capacity.
Okay, what's that?
Every soil has a natural built-in resistance to change. That's its buffering capacity. If you add too much acidifying agent too fast, you can overwhelm that natural buffer.
And then what happens?
The pH level can just crash or spike uncontrollably and permanently. The sources use the phrase nuking your soil. You end up with something that is bordering on impossible to fix.
And it's a long-term problem too, isn't it? It's not just about the topsoil.
That's the other hidden danger. A gardener might amend the top foot of soil and everything seems fine. But then 3 or 4 years later, their expensive new tree suddenly dies.
Why?
Because its roots finally push down deep enough to hit the underlying layer of untouched, toxic, alkaline subsoil. It's a time bomb.
This really drives home the value of those tough-as-nails pioneer plants, the ones that just don't care about the difficult soil, like the carragana.
Exactly. The humble carragana gets so much disrespect, but it deserves a medal. Its ability to thrive in terrible soil is precisely why it was used to plant the shelter belts during the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. It literally held the prairies together. It's a perfect example of working with the conditions you have.
Okay, let's switch from soil to water. I really appreciate that the guide starts this section not with the tip, but with a quote from Anna Pavord, a real philosophical gut check.
It's a great quote. Great waterfalls have been silenced so that we can turn on a tap. It's a powerful reminder that the water we use isn't free. It's a resource we've processed and diverted from a natural ecosystem at a huge environmental cost.
So being water-wise isn't just about the utility bill.
Not at all. It's about acknowledging that cost. But, and here's the tension. Right after that warning, the sources pivot to the #1 reason that newly planted trees and shrubs die.
And that is?
A complete lack of water, just sheer neglect.
So it's this balance between conservation and establishment.
It is. When you buy a tree and the tag says, water little once established, that last part is key. For the first season, maybe even 2 seasons, you have to water that plant deeply and regularly. A new plant only has the roots it came with in the pot. It has zero drought resistance until its roots grow out and deep into your native soil.
So for the listener, how do we define established? How long does that take?
The practical rule of thumb the guide gives is that a plant is well established once it has visibly doubled in size.
Doubled in size. Okay, that's a clear metric.
For a perennial, that might be a few months. For a tree or a big shrub, you should be planning on giving it focused, deep watering for up to 2 full seasons before you can really back off.
So if you're trying to manage your water use carefully, what's the priority list? What gets watered first?
You have to think in terms of vulnerability and your investment. Number one, top priority is always seedlings, new cuttings, and those expensive new trees and shrubs. They are the most fragile.
Makes sense. What's next?
Second priority would be your high water demand favorites. Things like hybrid tea roses, which are very thirsty, or juicy vegetables like tomatoes and cucumbers. They're mostly water, so they need consistent moisture.
And then last on the list.
Hanging baskets and containers. They're above ground, exposed to wind on all sides, so they dry out incredibly fast. In a real heat wave, they might need water every single day, sometimes even twice a day.
So for people who want to avoid all that work, what are some of the drought-resistant winters that really shine on the prairies?
You want to look for plants that have obvious adaptations, things like silver or fuzzy leaves. Blue flax is a great one. It's airy, it self-seeds politely, and it just blooms for months with almost no care.
What about grasses?
Blue oatgrass is fantastic. It's got that lovely blue-gray color, a nice vase shape, and it looks great all winter. And of course, the ultimate survivor is the native prickly pear cactus. It will happily grow in a spot that would bake anything else to a crisp.
Okay, moving on to the food. Fertilizer. Every bag has that NPK label. It can feel like a high school chemistry test.
It can, but the source breaks it down very simply. NPK is just nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And here's all you really need to remember. N is for leaves, green leafy growth. P is for roots and flowers. And K is for everything. Overall strength, disease resistance, the plant's immune system.
N for leaves, P for flowers, K for strength. That's super helpful. And the guide makes a really critical point. Fertilizer is nutrition, not medicine.
That is probably the most important thing to understand. You don't give fertilizer to a sick plant to make it better. You can actually stress it more. You only feed healthy, actively growing plants. And you have to be so careful with the dosage.
Especially with the nitrogen. Why is nitrogen so risky?
Because it can cause nitrogen burn. If you apply too much, the high salt concentration in the fertilizer literally sucks the water out of the plant cells through osmosis. It dehydrates them.
So what does that look like?
The best analogy is dog urine on a lawn, that yellow patch. That's a burn from the high concentration of urea, which is full of nitrogen. The mixing instructions on a fertilizer bag are not suggestions, they're absolute rules.
So we have different ways of delivering these nutrients. The fast-acting liquid feeds versus the slow organic options.
And they both have their uses. Something like Miracle Grow is water-soluble. It gives an immediate nutrient hit. That's great for giving a boost to your hanging baskets or your vegetable garden mid-season. But for long-term soil health, the slow-release organics are always going to be better.
So let's talk about those. Let's start with manure.
Manure, cow, horse, whatever, is mostly nitrogen. And the absolute critical rule is that it has to be well rotted. If you can still smell the barn, it's too hot, it's too fresh, and that nitrogen concentration will burn your plants. It should smell dark and earthy.
You don't need to add it all the time.
No, because it's so potent. For an established perennial bed, you really only need to dig in a good amount every 3 to 5 years.
Okay, what about guano, which is a polite term for bat or seabird droppings?
Right. And guano's claim to fame is that it's the richest natural source of phosphorus on the planet. And remember, P is for roots and blossoms, so guano is like rocket fuel for anything that flowers heavily. Roses, peonies, dahlias. They love it.
And kelp meal.
Kelp meal is another great one. Kelp grows incredibly fast in the ocean, so it soaks up a huge range of micronutrients. When it's processed into a meal, it provides this gentle, slow-release nutrition that also helps improve the soil structure.
But the most clever way to get nitrogen into your soil is to have the plants do the work for you. Nitrogen fixers.
This is nature's genius at work. Certain plants, mostly legumes, so peas, beans, clover, lentils, even the carrageenan we talked about, have the ability to pull nitrogen gas right out of the atmosphere.
Which other plants can't do.
Right, and they do it by forming a partnership with specific bacteria that live in little nodules on their roots. The bacteria take the atmospheric nitrogen and fix it into a form the plant can use, and in a turn, the plant gives the bacteria a steady diet of sugars. It's beautiful.
And this is the principle behind green manure, right?
Yeah, exactly. Farmers do this all the time. After a heavy feeding crop, they'll plant a cover crop of alfalfa or clover, let it grow, and then just till the whole thing back into the soil. It's a cheap, natural way to replenish all the nitrogen that was used up.
Okay, one final soil amendment we have to talk about because it's everywhere and it's cheap. Peat moss. The guide has a pretty strong warning about it.
Yeah, we have to be really clear about peat moss. It has its uses. It's fantastic at holding water up to 30 times its own weight. So if you have very dry, sandy soil, adding peat moss can really help. But if you have heavy clay soil, which is common on the prairies and already holds too much water, adding peat moss is the worst thing you can do. It just makes a waterlogged swamp even swampier.
And what's its other major flaw?
It has basically zero nutritional value. It's just a sponge. The guide makes the great point that you're much better off using things like shredded leaves or newspaper. They also hold moisture, but they break down and add valuable nutrients and carbon to the soil. Of course, you can't sell shredded leaves in a plastic bag, so you don't hear that advice very often.
All right, let's circle back to winter and the specific kinds of damage it does. The sources really hammer home that the threat isn't just the cold, it's something more insidious.
The fundamental threat, especially for evergreens, is desiccation, which is just a fancy word for drying out. It's a slow death by dehydration.
Well, how does that happen when everything's frozen?
Well, think about it from the plant's perspective. You're a cedar tree. It's a sunny, windy day in January. Your needles are still exposed, and they are losing moisture to that dry wind. That's called transpiration.
Okay.
But your roots are encased in a block of ice. They're completely frozen solid, so they can't suck up any new water to replace what the needles are losing.
Ah, I see. So there's water going out, but no water coming in.
Exactly. And over the course of a long, windy winter, that moisture deficit becomes lethal. This is why shelter is so critical for evergreens. A cedar planted out in the open, exposed to the wind, is almost guaranteed to get that ugly brown scorching on the windward side.
And that's different from what we call winter kill.
It is. Winter kill is the more direct physical damage from the cold. You see it as brittle, black, dead branch tips. It happens even on very hardy plants.
And the recovery is different depending on the plant.
Very different. A tough shrub like a rose might get a lot of tip kill, but it has a strategy for that. It just regrows vigorously from the base. An evergreen, though, those brown needles are dead forever. You can prune them off, but the plant recovers so slowly. Often it's just better to pull it out and start over, but this time in a more protected spot.
Okay, let's talk about timing. We all see those late-season nursery sales and get tempted by a bargain. Is it okay to plant a tree in the fall?
It's actually a great time to plant. As long as the ground isn't frozen solid, you can dig. But there is one absolute ironclad rule you have to follow.
What's that?
You must never fertilize a tree or shrub that you plant late in the season.
Why not?
Because fertilizer, especially one with high nitrogen, tells the plant to grow. It stimulates a flush of soft, tender new leaves and stems.
And that new growth has no time to prepare for winter.
No time at all to harden off, which is the process of preparing its cells for freezing temperatures. So that tender new growth is guaranteed to be killed by the first hard frost. You're basically encouraging it to commit suicide.
Okay, two other really common and ugly types of winter damage: sun scald and frost cracking. They leave these permanent scars on tree trunks.
They do, and sun scald is a really specific problem. You see it as these long, vertical splits or lesions, almost always on the south or southwest side of the trunk.
And it targets specific trees.
Yes, thin-barked trees are the most vulnerable. So mountain ash, amur cherry, young apple trees, and the mechanism behind it is fascinatingly brutal.
Okay, lay it on me.
On a bright winter day, the sun reflects off the white snow with incredible intensity. That reflected light hits the south side of the trunk and warms it up, enough to get the sap flowing just under the bark.
And then the sun sets.
The sun sets, the temperature plummets, and that thawed sap instantly freezes solid and expands. It literally ruptures the cells from the inside out, creating a wound.
So the solution isn't what I've always seen, which is wrapping the whole trunk in burlap.
No, that's not really the most effective way. The problem's the reflected light. So the best solution is to put up a small barrier, a piece of burlap, a piece of plywood, just on the south side of the trunk to block that intense glare coming off the snow. It mimics what happens in nature, where smaller shrubs would protect the trunk of a young tree.
Shifting gears to maintenance, let's talk pruning. The guide really insists that pruning can't just be random hacking. It has to have a goal.
Pruning without a goal is just vandalism. You have to ask yourself, what am I trying to achieve here? Am I trying to rejuvenate an old, overgrown shrub by cutting it back hard to force new growth? Am I shaping it for looks? Am I removing dead or diseased wood?
Or encouraging a specific feature.
Right, like with dogwoods. Their brightest red or yellow color is on the brand new stems. So if you want that brilliant winter color, you have to prune them hard every few years to force the plant to produce that new wood. If you don't know your goal, put the pruners down.
And the timing is critical. There are some major exceptions to the general rules.
Huge exceptions. The general rule is you can prune most things in late fall after the leaves drop or very early spring before they leaf out, but you absolutely have to know the exceptions.
Like what?
Birch and maple trees. If you prune them in spring or fall, their sap is running so heavily that they will just bleed profusely, which weakens the tree. They should only ever be pruned when they are in full leaf in the summer.
And what about things that flower in the spring, like lilacs?
Lilacs, forsythia, many fruit trees, they all form their flower buds for next year during the summer. So if you go out and prune your lilac in the fall, you are literally cutting off every single flower for the following spring. They have to be pruned right after they finish blooming and not a moment later.
All right, let's move on to the critters. I love the approach the sources take here, arguing that a truly healthy garden actually has bugs. It should be a fascinating menagerie.
It's a total paradigm shift. The guide says if you walk into your garden and see no insects at all, that's when you should be worried. That means something has gone terribly wrong with the ecosystem. The food chain is broken.
So the default attitude shouldn't be panic.
The default attitude should be curiosity. The vast majority of insects in your yard are either completely harmless or are actively beneficial. The philosophy to adopt is, what the insects are doing is none of my business, unless you see one actively munching on your prize-winning rose.
So before you spray, you identify.
Get a local field guide and figure out who you're looking at. The odds are you'll discover it's one of the good guys. And this, of course, ties into the absolute rule of avoiding pesticides.
Why is this so critical?
Because broad-spectrum pesticides are indiscriminate killers. They wipe out the beneficial predators just as effectively as the pests. And you also have to ask why you have a pest problem in the first place. A huge pest explosion is usually a sign of something else.
Like the plant being unhealthy.
Exactly. Aphids, for example, are drawn to plants that are weak or stressed because their soft new growth is easier to pierce and suck sap from. A healthy, thriving plant has natural defenses that can often keep a small pest population in check until the predators show up for lunch.
Speaking of aphids, let's talk about some specifics. They seem to be enemy number one for a lot of people.
They're everywhere. They're soft-bodied, they reproduce at an insane rate, and they tend to show up in heat waves. They weaken the plant, they can transmit viruses, and they excrete that sticky honeydew, which then attracts ants and wasps.
So what's the best non-chemical control?
The simplest and most effective. A strong, sharp blast of water from the hose just physically knock them off the plant. They're clumsy, and most of them can't find their way back on.
And their biggest predator is the ladybug.
Right.
But the guide says buying those bags of ladybugs from the store is basically a waste of money.
It's mostly futile. Ladybugs, and especially their larvae, which look like tiny black alligators and are even more voracious, are amazing predators. But they're smart. They won't set up a home unless there's a massive buffet.
So they want to see a full-blown infestation.
They want thousands and thousands of aphids to feed their family. If you release a container of them into a yard with just a few aphids on one rose bush, they're just going to fly away to your neighbor's house where the hunting is better. It's much better to create an environment that attracts them naturally.
Who are some of the other good guys we want to encourage?
Ground beetles. They are highly desirable. These are usually big, dark, shiny beetles that are nocturnal hunters. They're killing machines that come out at night and devour snails, slugs, caterpillars, even grasshoppers.
And how do we encourage them?
They like cool, moist places to hide during the day. So having a layer of wood mulch or a healthy compost pile is basically putting up a vacancy sign for ground beetles.
And what about the things they eat, like slugs and snails?
The slimy ones. They're ravenous eaters of soft-leafed plants like hostas and ferns. They come out at night or on rainy days, and they leave that telltale slime trail behind them. Interestingly, that slime trail isn't just a byproduct. It's a chemical roadmap that tells other slugs where the good food is.
Gross. Okay, one very specific prairie pest is the currant worm.
Yes, which isn't a worm at all. It's the larva of a sawfly. And they are notorious. They can strip every single leaf off a currant or gooseberry bush literally overnight in the early summer.
And they're hard to spot.
Very. They're the exact same color as the leaves. The best control is just to be vigilant and handpick them off as soon as you see the first signs of damage.
Let's shift to fungal problems, starting with the very ugly black knot.
Black knot is a fungal disease that looks exactly like its name. It creates these dark, crusty, swollen growths on the branches of cherry species. So, choke cherries, mayday trees, pin cherries. The source accurately describes it as looking like dog crap.
And it's hard to get rid of.
It's impossible to eliminate entirely because it's endemic in the native choke cherry population. Birds eat the fruit, fly to your yard, and spread the spores. You can manage it by pruning off the infected branches, making sure to cut about 15 centimeters below the knot, but you'll be fighting it forever. It's a battle of vigilance.
Then there's the much more tragic story of Dutch elm disease, or DED.
DD is just devastating. It's a fungal disease that's 100% fatal to elm trees. It was brought to North America on infected wood crates, and it's spread by a tiny bark beetle.
And what does it do to the tree?
The fungus gets into the tree's vascular system and clogs it up, so the tree can't move water anymore. It dies of dehydration over a few seasons. The first sign is usually heartbreaking. A single branch turning a brilliant gold color weeks before the rest of the trees in the fall.
But the sources highlight a massive success story in the fight against DED right here on the prairies.
It's an incredible story. Alberta, and especially a city like Edmonton, has one of the healthiest and largest populations of mature elm trees left in the entire world. We're talking an estimated 60,000 elms just on city property.
And that's not just luck.
Not at all. It's the result of decades of incredibly strict protocols, mandatory scouting, public awareness campaigns, and the immediate removal and destruction of any infected tree. You have to destroy it completely because the fungus can live on in the dead wood for years. It's a testament to what a community can do when it works together.
Okay, let's talk bigger animals. The guide has a great line. You are not Snow White.
Right. Sometimes you have to be firm, especially with deer.
The bane of many a gardener.
Deer are creatures of habit. Once they find your yard and your expensive hostas, they will be back every day. The source is very clear. The only 100% effective solution is a fence, a tall fence, over 2 meters.
And if you can't or won't do that,
Then you have to make your yard an unpleasant place for them to be. You have to actively harass them, run out, yell, spray them with the hose. They need to learn that your yard is a place of threat, not a peaceful all-you-can-eat salad bar.
on the flip side, we have the animals we do want, birds.
Birds are hugely desirable. They eat insects, they pollinate, their song brings the garden to life, and the way to attract them is to provide for their basic needs: food, water, and shelter.
What does that shelter look like?
A layered planting. Tall conifers provide safe roosting spots, and spiny shrubs like hawthorn, sea buckthorn, roses give them a place to build nests where predators like cats can't easily reach them, and a clean source of water is a huge magnet.
And the sources give some fun, specific examples of what different birds like.
Yeah, this is great. Martins and swallows are fantastic for mosquito control. Goldfinches love the seeds of sunflowers and echinacea. And orioles weirdly love oranges. If you put out orange halves, they'll come.
What about wasps? We're usually trying to get rid of them.
We should reconsider that. There are many kinds of wasps. The parasitic and hunting wasps are incredible allies. They prey on caterpillars and other chewing insects. Even a paper wasp nest, if it's not in a bad spot, is a net positive for the garden's ecosystem.
And finally, our own domestic animals, our pets, the magazine fantasy versus the reality.
The fantasy is the cat sitting elegantly amongst the flowers. The reality is the dog digging up your new seedlings or the cat killing all the birds you just attracted. The guide is very blunt. Those expensive repellent sprays and granules just don't work for long.
So what does?
Training and barriers. A dog can be a great deer deterrent, but you might need to fence off your vegetable patch to protect it from your dog. Ultimately, it's about management, not magic potions.
All right, let's head to the garden center, which can be a real minefield. Let's start with the basics of identity. Why do we need to bother with those intimidating Latin names?
It feels academic, I know. But the Latin is absolutely imperative because it is the only thing that is definitive and universal. Common names are a total mess.
How so?
The sources give a great example. The plant Impatiens glandulifera has over 75 different common names around the world. 75. Or if you ask for soapwort, do you mean the yucca or the saponaria? They are totally different plants.
So the Latin name is like a unique serial number for that plant.
Exactly. It removes all ambiguity. It's the universal language that ensures you, the grower, and the nursery are all talking about the exact same thing.
And while we're on identity, let's clear up the difference between a variety and a cultivar.
This is a really important distinction. A variety is a variation that occurs naturally in the wild. Like the native chokecherry has red fruit, but there's a naturally occurring variety with yellow fruit. The key is it will grow true from seed.
So its offspring will be like the parent.
Right. You can think of it like a purebred. A cultivar, on the other hand, is a cultivated variety. This is something created by humans. It's a clone, selected for a specific trait, like purple leaves or double flowers.
And because it's a clone.
Its seeds won't produce the same plant. If you plant a seed from a black lace elder, you won't get another black lace elder. You'll get a plain old green one. The only way to propagate a cultivar is through cuttings or tissue culture. It's a fancy mutt, not a purebred.
This distinction leads us right into how the whole plant industry has changed. The old model versus the new corporate one.
The old model was, dedicated plant breeders at research stations working for decades to produce a plant that was genuinely hardier or more disease-resistant or just a better performer in a specific climate. They would test things for 20 years before releasing them. The goal was real improvement.
And the new model.
The new corporate model is often about marketing. The goal is to create a plant that looks absolutely irresistible in a pot on a shelf in May. It's designed for the impulse buy.
And the sources suggest that if it doesn't perform well long-term, that might actually be part of the business plan.
It's a bit cynical, but the logic holds up. If the plant you bought this year peters out by July, well, that just ensures you'll be back next year to buy a replacement. It prioritizes quick turnover, not long-term garden success.
And this leads to a really profound concern that the guide raises. The issue of genetic modification in ornamental plants, specifically for sterility.
This is a huge and often invisible factor in the modern plant world, especially with things like hanging basket annuals, your petunias, your calibrachoas. Many of them are specifically engineered to be sterile.
Meaning they can't produce viable seeds.
Right. The genes for reproduction are literally switched off, and from a commercial perspective, this is brilliant. A plant's main goal in life is to make seeds. If it can't make seeds, it just keeps trying. It pours all of its energy nonstop into producing more and more flowers.
So we get a much longer, more spectacular bloom season.
Maximum visual impact. But the sources express this real anxiety about the ecological cost. We're taking a living organism, and for our own aesthetic pleasure, we're removing its fundamental purpose. We're bypassing millions of years of evolution just so we don't have to deadhead our petunias.
It changes the plant from a participant in the ecosystem to just a decoration.
A temporary, non-generative decoration. It's a huge philosophical shift away from that friend and teacher idea we started with.
Okay, so if the industry is full of these tricks, we need a translation guide for the nursery speak on the plant tags.
We do. This is the secret language that will save you so much grief.
Let's go through some. What does hardy to zone 4 really mean?
It often means we tested it in our zone 4 nursery. Your zone 3 market is too small for us to waste money testing it there, so good luck.
Okay, what about vigorous grower?
That's code for this thing suckers like crazy from the roots and you will be cruising the day you planted it.
Excellent filler.
Is currently plotting a hostile takeover of your entire yard. Will smother smaller, more polite plants. Use with extreme prejudice.
This is great. Richly scented.
That is highly subjective. It usually means some people think this stinks to high heaven, and the opposite, delicately scented, almost always means has no smell whatsoever.
And my favorite, the size estimate. Grows 2 meters tall.
Means will grow 2 meters tall in the lush, mild, humid paradise of coastal British Columbia. In your windy, dry prairie yard, you'll be lucky to get 1 meter.
That guide alone is worth the price of admission. Now let's talk about money. Plant warranties. The sources are not a fan.
No. The standard 1-year warranty is described as one of the worst things to happen to the industry because it makes people think of a living plant like a toaster.
Something that's guaranteed to work for a year or you get a new one.
Exactly. But a plant isn't a manufactured object. It's a living thing that requires care. If you buy a tree and then don't water it all summer and it dies, That's not a product defect, that's neglect.
And the guide had that shocking story about the homeowner and the birch tree.
It's just horrifying. This person bought a large, expensive birch tree, killed it through sheer neglect, and then bragged that it was no big deal because the nursery had to give them a brand new one for free.
That's an incredible sense of entitlement.
It is, and that mentality is what crushes small, independent nurseries who have to absorb the cost of that customer error. It removes all responsibility from the gardener.
So, since gardening can be expensive, what are some of the smart ways to acquire plants on a budget?
The number one way is to talk to other gardeners. People are almost always thrilled to give away divisions of plants that have gotten too big for their space. Things like daylilies, irises, hostas, they need to be divided anyway.
What else?
Look for Horticultural Society plant sales. You can get seeds and plants for pennies on the dollar. And check online classifieds. The great thing about buying a plant from someone's yard down the street is you have a 100% guarantee that it's hardy in your exact climate.
And it's also about trading time for money.
Absolutely. You can't afford a $200 2-meter tall tree. Buy a $40 sapling. You save a ton of money, but you're trading it for 3 to 5 years of your time while it grows. Buying Barrett dahlia tubers in the spring is way cheaper than buying a fully grown potted dahlia in the summer. And rooting cuttings from a friend's lilac is free, but you'll wait 4 years for flowers.
So the key is patience.
Patience and community, they can save you a fortune.
Okay, let's get down to brass tacks.
Mm-hmm.
Specific plants to choose and specific plants to avoid. We'll start underground with bulbs and their cousins. The guide makes a point of clarifying the different types.
Yeah, this is important because it tells you how to care for them. A true bulb, like a tulip or an onion, is made of fleshy layers. A tuber is a swollen underground stem, like a potato or a dahlia. It has eyes where new growth sprouts.
And tubers are the ones we have to dig up in the fall here.
Right, because they're full of water and would freeze solid. Then you have rhizomes, which are those creepy horizontal rootstocks. Think of ginger or bearded iris or bamboo. They are natural colonizers.
And the last one is a corm.
The corm is the weird one. It's a solid, swollen stem base, like a gladiolus. Each year, the old corm shrivels up and a new one forms on top of it.
And with the tubers, especially dahlias, the sources really emphasize patience.
Dahlias are the ultimate lesson in delayed gratification. You plant a tuber the first year and you get a few measly flowers and you think, what's the big deal? But dahlias are like fine wine. They get so much better with age. They only really start to put on a spectacular show after year 3, once they've built up a really big, substantial clump of tubers.
What about the king of spring bulbs, the tulips? The guide has some, let's say, unconventional advice.
It's fantastic advice. First, it says tulips are seriously idiot-proof. You plant them in the fall, they bloom in the spring, you look like a genius. But here is the controversial, liberating tip.
I'm ready.
As soon as the flowers fade, rip them out. Just pull the whole plant out of the ground and throw it on the compost pile.
But what about letting the foliage die down to feed the bulb for next year?
Ignore that. That is old, laborious advice that leaves you looking at ugly, yellowing, floppy foliage for 6 weeks in the prime of your growing season. Treat them like annuals. You got your show. It was great. Now rip them out and use that valuable real estate to plant your summer flowers immediately.
There's genuinely life-changing advice.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the big, expensive decisions. Trees. The guide issues a very, very strong warning against the Mayday cherry.
The Mayday tree is presented as public enemy number 1 for the prairie garden. And for good reason. It should be avoided at all costs.
Why? It flowers so early, it's a sign of spring.
That's the trap. Yes, it flowers early, for about 7 to 10 days, max. And then you have 2 weeks of messy, brown, fading petals raining down on everything.
And the problems don't stop there.
Oh no, it suckers from the roots relentlessly. The fruit drops and stains your deck and sidewalk a lovely shade of purple-black. It is a magnet for black knot disease. And worst of all, it gets the most disgusting, biblical plague-level aphid infestations you have ever seen, which turns the entire tree into a sticky, dripping mess that then attracts swarms of wasps. It is a high-maintenance nightmare.
So in contrast to the Mayday disaster, we have the triumphant return of the humble carigana.
The carigana is the indestructible hero that deserves our respect. It's a pioneer species. It thrives in the worst soil, the worst wind, the worst cold. It's a nitrogen fixer, so it improves the soil around it. And we have to remember its history. It's the tree that literally saved the topsoil of the prairies from blowing away in the 30s. It needs nothing from us and gives us so much.
What about the weeping willow? Everyone loves that classic, graceful look.
The classic one, Salix babylonica, is not hardy here. It's a Zone 5 tree, and it will die. But this is a perfect example of a smart compromise. Plant breeders in Morden, Manitoba developed a hardy hybrid called Prairie Cascade. It gives you that same beautiful weeping form, but it's tough enough to handle our winters.
One last warning was about bringing a native plant into the garden. Just because it's native doesn't mean it's well behaved.
No, not at all. The example given is the native prairie wild rose. Out in a field, it's beautiful, it's fragrant, but you bring it into a garden with nice soil and regular water, and it becomes extremely aggressive and very difficult to eliminate. It will send out runners and take over everything. Always research a plant's habits, even if it's from your own backyard. Hashtag tag outro.
Well, that was a true deep dive into resilience, a real shortcut to understanding what it takes to have a successful garden in a short season.
It really was.
We've learned that it's all about, stopping the fight, stop fighting the cold, and start working with that incredible microscopic empire under your shoes.
And stop believing the marketing lies on the plant tags. Start appreciating the simple, honest survival of something like a carragana.
I think the biggest takeaway is that resilience isn't something you can buy in a bag. It's local. It comes from really understanding your specific place.
Your soil, your water, which way the wind blows across your yard, and understanding that success isn't instant. It's this joyful, ongoing commitment to just paying attention.
And that idea of patience, that feels like the perfect place to end.
It really is. I mean, gardening is the perfect antidote to our instant gratification world, isn't it? The simple act of growing something from a tiny seed and waiting years for it to mature, it's profoundly rewarding.
It teaches you a different rhythm.
It teaches you the rhythm of the seasons, that act of maintaining the garden, the daily walkthrough, keeping a little journal, the fall chores. That's not work. That's the practice. That's the relationship.
Earlier in our deep dive, we talked a lot about that shift in the plant industry, where new plants are being bred for this immediate, perfect visual display.
Right, often by making them sterile. They switch off the genes for making seeds, so all the plant's energy goes into making more flowers for longer.
It's engineered to satisfy our desire for nonstop blooms, without the mess of reproduction.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener.
In our pursuit of this immediate, visually spectacular, sterile perfection, are we fundamentally sacrificing the plant's entire ecological purpose? The ability to reproduce, to set seed, to adapt, and to naturally enhance the ecosystem around it.
What vital generative aspect of nature are we losing from our own backyards when we consistently choose that perfect, sterile cultivar over a hardy, generative variety that might just hold the key to future resilience?